All right, everyone, welcome. I'm here for one of my stories. This is Lindsay Dunn, and today I am here interviewing Dan Deacon. Dan is a Baltimore-based musician and composer known for his innovative and eclectic electronic music and his lively concerts, where he solicits and expects audience participation. His most recent studio album is the 2020 Mystic Familiar. While you may have heard his music licensed for shows like the Netflix series Dark, Limitless, and Teen Wolf, to name just a few, he is commissioned often to compose entire film scores, which is the main subject of this interview. Some of the films he scored previously are Theo Anthony's documentaries Rat Film and Subject to Review, Finley Pretzel's Time Trial, Francis Ford Coppola's fantasy horror film Twixt. Now, during Sundance 2021, 3 films Dan worked on premiered, which might make him the film score composer MVP for this festival. Those are Philly DA, Strawberry Mansion, and All Light Everywhere. Let's start with talking about your background. You attended music conservatory at State University of New York. Today, you specialize in electronic music. Tell us about your background as a musician and how you chose music as a career path.
That's a good question. I think I got into music kind of like as an extension of video games. Like when I was getting my family purchased remember when computers were beige? Like it was like a beige computer, and we bought it used, so it had a bunch of software already on it. And my parents ran like a pest control company, it was just the two of them, and they needed some way to like keep the records easier to access. So they got just basically something to do data management. And for some reason, it had this MIDI program on it, and I fell in love with it. It was like a lot like MS Paint. This was in Windows 3.1. And you would just click on there, and I could already read music because I played trombone in the school band, but I really fell in love with the process of doing it. And I never played piano, and I can sing in the same way that I can run. I'm not, if that makes any sense. So I never really thought of myself as a musician, but I really liked writing these MIDI files. And then I was born in the 80s, so I had to go to college. Everyone was encouraged to go to college, as we can tell by the massive amount of student loan debt right now. And I was just studying nothing. I was studying political science and taking all the required courses, but all my spare time I was just writing these absurd MIDI files, to the point where I was thinking about dropping out of school, and my friends were like, "Why? But you love music." And I was like, "Yeah, but I never have any time to write it." And they're like, "Aren't you in the music program?" And I was like, No, I just study and they're like, "You're the biggest idiot we've ever met. Why aren't you in the music program? All you do is write music. Why don't you go into the music program where all you do is write music for school?" And so I did. I often want to throw a party on who you would have been if, and you have to present what the turning point was. And I guess mine would have been if I didn't go to school for music, or if I never heard Mr. Bungle in high school. First time, did you ever hear the band Mr. Bungle?
No.
Well, they don't age very well, but they're kind of like a hardcore band meets circus music meets just sound design. And hearing it when I was in 9th grade, growing up on Long Island, I didn't know music could be like that. I was like, "What the hell is this? This is the craziest music I've ever heard in my life." And that kind of started me going down this path of well, what's weirder than that? And what influenced that? And how did that happen? And where did that come from? And now here we are.
You contribute to music in many realms, and this certainly isn't your first foray into film score composing. Talk to us about creating music for film and how that process might be different than creating music just for listening to music for its sake alone.
Sure. I think what I like the most about film scoring is that it's a new collaboration every time, and tends to be a collaboration with a non-musician. And the reason why I say every time is because even though this, like All Light Everywhere, is my third score for one of Theo Anthony's films, the film itself is another element of the collaboration, the content of the story in that universe. So everything starts with a blank canvas, and that alone is going to shift the process and how we work and how we approach it. And I just love that about it. It's like, you know, starting to come from a complete blank slate and then finding out what the story is, what it's going to be. And an experimental piece like All Light Everywhere, like it's going to evolve the whole time. It's going to be very call and response, how the music's going to be influenced by the story, and the music is going to influence the story as well. And then a project like Strawberry Mansion, where I get a script and can riff off of the script, and then Albert can be like, oh, I really like this, I'm going to sit on this while we shoot and see how that goes. Or, you know, like Philly DA, which is like, I basically get locked edits and I have to put music in, but everything has to be, you know, you go through the director and the producer and so much with the editor. I think that's something that I didn't realize until I started scoring films, is that editors make so many musical choices because they're really deciding the tempo and the flow of what we're watching so much more than anybody else. And it's my job to give that life and know what to amplify and what to let just be. But I think that's the biggest difference when I'm writing music that's for an album. It's everything is storytelling, and everything for both sides is this world creation. But with a film score, it's one part of a larger world. While the music can go anywhere within a film score, it still exists within this infinity of the film, and the score is a small part of that. And you need to make sure that it doesn't, you never want it to distract. It always you want it to feel cohesive and a part of it. While the music, you want at times to pull someone's attention in. So that's all, like if you're writing an album, I want there to be moments where like people are like, oh, I just want to listen to this. Like, hold on a second. I never want anyone to listen that way while watching the film. It's never been like, oh, I wish these idiots would shut up with their dialogue so I can listen to it. Like, that would ruin the movie. And it's hard to avoid that temptation. And it's I think important to have that like kind of I don't know, for lack of a better term, like ego death in like the film is a part of something larger. And I often don't even know what the whole scope of the project is until it's completely done, depending on where I'm entering into the project. So it's building a language with the director, finding what the palette of sounds and colors we're going to use, what role the music is as a character. Is it a major role? Is it a minor role? Does it come in and out? Who's the music for in each scene? Is it supposed to be within the viewer's mind? Are we amplifying the subtext of something they're seeing? Or is the music supposed to be something that someone on screen is feeling and we're witnessing it rather than the ones experiencing it? So that shapes everything. Each film is like starting a new band. And one of the members of the band is a non-sentient film.
So let's talk about the projects that you did for Sundance. Let's start with Strawberry Mansion.
Strawberry Mansion is a indie sci-fi love story. It's funny, I could like write an essay about what the film is, but not sum up in a few sentences what it's about. It's about like a near future. Like if you consider this to be a dystopian present, imagine what's going to be like in 15 years. But it's about a dream auditor, someone who works for a bureau of government that taxes dreams and gets called out to an old woman's house who has requested an audit be done on them. And while James Preble, the tax dream auditor, is there, starts unfolding almost a loop in time. And through that, it's an endearing psychedelic love story. We started with the script, and Albert and I, well, no, I guess we started earlier. Albert and I were riffing. Albert also lives in Baltimore, and we're good friends. And we both had films at South by in 2017. I wonder, I'm going to just start saying 2017. In 2017, that's kind of where we got to know each other, and we were like, oh, it'd be so fun to do a film together, da da da. And he's like, oh, I got this crazy movie. It's kind of sci-fi. And then time went on, we started talking about it more and more. And when we realized that we were going to collaborate, we started talking about like what role the music would play and what role the music played in comparable films that we wanted this film to be in the same universe of. And I think the main one we go back to, which, as a jumping off point, now it's very, very, has departed pretty far from that, was The Never Ending Story. And this like dream, like going back and forth between worlds, a real world and a fantasy world, where in Strawberry Mansion, it's the real world and the dream world, and they collide, and you don't ever really know, like, are you in the dream world, or are you you yourself watching a dream, or which part of it is the dream? Where does the beginning and end begin? Playing with that concept quite a bit. We also talked a lot about like Nightmare on Elm Street. That's another film that like plays with that same sort of mode and like classic 80s score, like really wild use of drum machine, and just started building like a playlist and like throwing stuff on there and talking with Albert about like, I love talking to non-musicians about music because it's like, I don't know, a teacher used to say it's like dancing about architecture. Like it's like so difficult to convey non-musical ideas if you're not a musician. And Albert really liked music that modulated a lot, and he didn't know how to say that. He'd be like, I like when it sounds like it turns into another song, but it's the same song. Like, I can't remember exactly what he said. And I was like, do you mean like this? And he's like, yes, that's it. We should modulate all the time. And I don't even know how much we modulate from like key to key. It's not really something I do very often, but that's just kind of how it started. We just started like riffing, and then we were like, all right, well, we want to make sure that since the story is we want there to be not like Easter eggs, but the more you watch this film, the more you're like, oh, that character's this, and this is that, and that connects to here, and that's the first time we see that. To make sure that the motifs had the same sort of return viewing pleasure, and also that like they had like Bella, the main character, she exists both as a younger version of herself and an older version of herself. She also exists as a fly and just a voice. And so how do you convey that? And she exists in what we perceive to be the real world, and also in a dream world. She exists within her own dreams and within Preble's dreams. So do you stick with one texture for that? Do you move the theme around? So we kind of threw a lot of conventions out the window while trying to see what would stick. So that's kind of like how we honed in on an instrumentation, being like, all right, well, Bella will be both harp and cello, but that won't be the only time we hear those things. And Preble, he exists in the 2035 future that this takes place in. He does tax auditing. He has crazy electronic equipment. We'll go with electronics for him, but that won't be the only time we hear electronics, because we don't know really where we are in time or space. And so every time I would write something, I'd write this like long essay to make sure it like fit into the logic of it. And I'd say 99 out of 100 times, Albert and Kentucker would just like text me back like an emoji of them being like far out. And but it was a really fun process, and they were super, the whole thing happened via Zoom because of COVID. Like I don't think we had any face-to-face meetings other than what we're doing now. And but that was the process, kind of just like really diving into the story and trying to get down on like a deep conceptual level. And then they just gave me complete creative freedom to go wild within that. Once we knew we had the logic, the illogical logic of the universe nailed, it was kind of easy to write in and like riff within those parameters. Also knowing that the rules themselves weren't too precious, but like it's easier to drive real fast when you're staying in the lines, but it's real fun when you swerve up the road a little bit.
How about All Light Everywhere?
All Light Everywhere, in short, is an even more difficult task. But Theo's films are essay films, documentary with like the perfect film for like the True False Festival, a hybrid doc, if you will. But this one's much more of a doc. And Theo very thoughtfully and meticulously chronicles the advancement of the development of the camera to the surveillance state, and how cameras and seeing have always been weaponized from each state. And we put so much trust and naive trust into thinking, oh, this new version of the technology will be what helps us. And it never is devoid of corruption or a flaw in its initial design. And it focuses a lot on Axon body camera, who used to be called Taser. And I think that's what drew me to the project, was hearing Theo talk about body cameras, which, when you hear about a person being murdered by the police, people are like, oh, well, the police need body cameras. We got to put body cameras on those police. But the body cameras aren't designed for accountability of the police. They're designed to gather evidence. It was a really intriguing process. I feel very lucky to work with Theo, and the film was for us, a very unique experience. Like normally, if this were not COVID times, we would have been sitting in the same room probably for like weeks. Like, it's funny, I have this HDMI switcher here that I fidget with because I don't have a use for it right now. But we used to just like have our computers set up right next to each other, and like we'd switch between my computer, and he'd be like, oh, looking at the waveform, like, oh, and like sort of editing while watching. And we would like jam. That's kind of like how we did Rat Film. But with this one, since we couldn't do it in person, I would watch the footage that he would send. And sometimes it was like, really long reels or raw takes or the beginning of an assembly. And I would just watch, and then not scoring the picture at all, just write like an improvisation. Or we did a session with 3 improvisers: Susan Alcorn on pedal steel, Owen Gardner on cello, and Andrew Bernstein on alto sax. 3 of my favorite musicians and improvisers in Baltimore. And luckily we did this in December, because the original idea was, oh, I'll do it after tour in the summer of 2020. And that wouldn't have happened. So I'm really glad we got the session in. And the session was like, each of them were in a separate room, and I would give like very short, simultaneously vague and very specific directions. Like, all right, well, imagine that you're watching the eclipse. Let's have the piece last between 10 and 20 minutes. Keep it to this pitch set. Bernie, try to do circular breathing. Owen, real soul ponticello the whole time. Susan, let's do only clusters and swell in and out until you get to what you feel is a sense of totality, and then slowly drift back down to nothing. And we would do like 40 different takes like that. So building this like hours and hours long library of improvisations that I would then go into and like chop and slice and sequence and throw into, make granular synths out of them. And that's sort of like how we built the bed of what we were doing. And then from there, let's say this had 8 tracks. I would send all those 8 tracks to Theo, not summed down into one song, but 8 separate audio files, so that he could then mix them in and fade them out as he wanted. Everything would stay in place in time, but that like allowing him to like take a music producer's role really opened up the collaboration through distance. So I could hear like, okay, this is the level of density he's going for there. Then he started sending me the Premiere file, and I would open up the Premiere file and look at it. And that's something I've never done before. And looking at the way he would automate, and then I would bring that into Ableton and replicate it and send it back and forth until we eventually did a couple of days in a studio in Baltimore, tightening it up. But even some of the pieces that are on the end of the final product are co-mixes between the two of us. And some, like, there's one section where, like, the week before, he's like, hey, I'm going to add music in this one scene. I'm just going to mix up some of these stems. I was like, sounds good. And normally, if that was another project, I'd be like, definitely not. Please don't do that. It does say music by my name at the end, and I am terrified of the idea of relinquishing control. But I think Theo is such a true and honest collaborator that everything feels like a conversation and a dialogue, and that including the film itself. And I think that's what I love about it.
Were there any moments in any of the scores that were really challenging, and how did you go about resolving that challenge for scoring a particular moment in the film?
Musically speaking, there's two cues that stick out in my mind that were a lot to get out. And in All Light Everywhere, we call it the levitation scene. And it's a scene with a lot of visual effects, and it's kind of like culminating on like Axon and the company that does like the eyeball tracing software, and there's a lot of special effects that come kind of out of nowhere, especially for a documentary. And it was getting it to that level of just like complete and utter noise while there's still cohesion. And that part was a big challenge. And I do think we're going to even go back and do a post-premiere revision of the sound in that section, just because it's just, you know, even beyond me and Theo being separated by distance, the sound designer, Udit, who did an incredible job, is, you know, like 13 time zones away. So even like having a Zoom between the three of us has been near impossible. But that was a big challenge, and I'm really happy with how it came out. I'm excited to keep refining it, but getting that mix without being able to sit in the studio together was a major hurdle. And for Strawberry Mansion, it is the final cue. Everything else was pretty much like Albert and Tucker would be like, sounds good. And I'd be like, really? You don't want any like notes or revisions? Because like I could make it better. And they're like, well, why don't you just make it better and then send it when it's done? And I'm like, because normally people have like tons of pages of notes. And they're like, ah, that's cool. So we got growing on this groove, and things were really flowing. And then we got to like the last cue. I don't want to like give away the ending of the movie at all, but they were like, this isn't working. I was like, okay, well, how about this? And they were like, no, that's not it either. And we did 96 versions, and I was like tearing my hair out by like the 40th. But by the time we got to like the 70th version, I knew it wasn't going to be close, but that we were like, it's like digging a tunnel, and it's just like, oh, the tunnel's going to collapse and kill me. And then you get like towards the end of the tunnel and you're like, I'm so close. But you know, you're not there yet. And I think it was driving them a little crazy as well, because they obviously had to like listen to it and give feedback back on it. And I had to like take that feedback, and I don't take feedback very well. But looking back, I think it's the strongest cue in the film. And it was fun to have that elusive music that's in your head and getting it out. I think that's the hardest part, especially working with like all virtual instruments. Like it's a pretty like string heavy and I don't know, like orchestral hybrid symphonic mix, but it's all virtual except for a few instruments, and just getting it to have that like that breath that a conductor would bring. I think that was what really took the longest time. And it was fun, and I'm really glad that we did it. But it was a challenge for sure.
Are there any directors you haven't worked with yet that you would love to score their film?
Oh, definitely. I'm sure many of the people that I'd love to work with are just discovering the camera right now. I'm going to list people that I know I will not work with, that I would love to work with. Like, I'd love to work with David Lynch. It's not going to happen. It's just not. And nor would I want to end his collaboration. I always forget the composer's name who he collaborates with.
Angelo Badalamenti.
Yes, thank you. Like it would suck if like David Lynch's like late career didn't include Angelo. That'd be like a bummer. But I'd love to work with David Lynch. So Angelo, hit the road, Jack. It really depends on the film though and the project. It's insane that I started my career working with Francis Ford Coppola. Francis heard me do an interview on NPR about how music has the benefit of being a fixed piece of art on the recording, and then live can be performed however the musician wants, and the audience feeds into that, and you can extend certain sections or amplify them or play them softer, and if the audience is really ruckus, you can lean into that, and if the audience is timid or antagonistic, you can lean into that or shy away from it, and it changes what everything is, but it will never change the fixed piece. It might change the memory of it and your interaction with it, but that will never change. And I think it was a question of like, what do you like more, performing or recording? And I was trying to talk about the unique benefits of both.
Right.
Because I'll never perform a perfect show. I'll never make a perfect album either, but I can get as close to what I'm capable of recording, and live night to night, it's that unique moment. Boom, completely ephemeral. And I like that I like that about it. The same way where I like classical music in that sense. Like you can read the score and hear it in your head, and it's going to sound completely different every performance in every different room with every different soloist and the nuance that comes with it. Anyway, so he heard me riffing about this and invited me out. And at first I thought I was getting kidnapped because like his email is just like an insane series of numbers and letters. And I was like, there's no way this is Francis Ford Coppola. And after like the third email from a different email address, I like Googled it, and I was like the consulate of Belize came up, and I was like, he is the consulate of Belize. That maybe it really is him. So we went out. I mean, I just went out by myself, and I was like convinced I was getting kidnapped, but I wasn't. And he gave me a lot of wine. He lives on a vineyard, and we hung out all day, just like talking like two buds. Like he's very, very. He just really wanted to like talk and pick my brain, and that made me feel very good and safe and comfortable to discuss my ideas and concepts and like hear his and just to riff. And then, you know, it's nighttime at this point, and we've been like cruising around on a golf cart, just drinking wine. And he's like, do you want to watch Apocalypse Now? In the room I mixed it in. I was like, yes, I want to watch
Absolutely.
Apocalypse Now. He's like, it's the extent. I was like, yeah, I figured it would be the director's cut, Francis. I think like, actually, after doing all that, we're going back to the studio cut. We're going to studio. And at this point, I'm like pretty ripped. And he's like, oh, that's the ARP 2600, which is it's a synth like that orange and black one, but he had the gray version. He's like, and it's at that time in my life, it was a very coveted synth. And he's like, oh yeah, this is the one where we did all these sounds and like. So I am just stoked, and we get through like the opening scene. I like turn, and I'm about to like be like, that was amazing, because it sounds incredible in there. Like it's the room. They were like, yeah, this is it. And he's gone. He's just gone. Francis isn't in the room. What? And he's just not there. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I text him, and I'm like, and I waited a while before I texted him. I was like, maybe he's in the bathroom. I don't know. I texted him. I'm like, where'd you go? He's like, oh, I never watch my movies after the premiere. And I was like, this movie's like 4.5 hours long. I don't know where I am. And at that point, he had already gone to bed. And I'm like somewhere on the estate. I don't know where I am. And I'm just wandering around in the dark, drunk, trying to find the guest house that I'm staying in, peering into other windows. And I looked into one, and it was where Val Kilmer was staying. And that's how I didn't meet Val that way, but like, it was just a crazy experience. So that's how I got into film scoring. Hundreds of years from now, Francis Ford Coppola will still be known as one of the initiators of what cinema is. Like, to work with someone who was working with a medium that was so new, but still had this quest for, I'm going to experiment, and I don't work with big studios anymore, and everything that we do is unique to our process, and a different ruler of success than I think a lot of his peers. Like, I don't know, Francis was just a really true, genuine artist who just wanted to make things with people. And the longer I'm in any industry, the music industry, and my short time in the film industry, you realize that those people are very rare. People who just want to make something, that they just want to make something. whether it's something brand new and paradigm shifting and pushing the boundary, or it's just going to be a really fun story. Both those things are super important to just wanting to continue to be an artist and not just someone who wants a paycheck.
Okay, well, it has been wonderful speaking to you this evening, Dan. Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Good night.